Teal deer. Slut-shaming. I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for those pesky dames. Ah, Scooby-Doo jokes. But seriously, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. But come with me on a journey of misrepresentative stats and very poorly worded studies, and you will find out why.
Hello viewers.
And neck-bearded, fedora-wearing virgins of the internet.
This week on Those Pesky Dames we're going to be talking about slut-shaming, which is a topic so huge that I can't say everything I'd like to. Before we begin, this brings up some potentially triggering issues.
Overly sensitive viewers may wish to familiarise themselves with the quickest route to their nearest Tumblr panic room now.
So I'd like to issue a trigger warning for this video before I start.
Quick, get to your internet hug box before it's too late! I, on the other hand, would like to issue a trigger warning of my own for this video. This video was made in 2014, and has still been shot in 4:3. Seriously, what the fuck? But anyway, moving on. Oh god, I'm being triggered. Oh god, oh god, ah!
So, sluts. Slut, whore, tramp, skank are words, along with a whole host of others, used to insult women.
Dick, cock, penis, bellend, scrotum are words, along with a whole host of others, used to insult men.
When a person calls a woman a slut, what they usually mean is, I disapprove of her sexual activity or perceived sexual activity and wish to bring her down for it.
Except for all of those times that numerous studies have found that that is not the case.
So things which can get you called a slut include sleeping with your partner, sleeping with someone who isn't your partner, having sex with one person, having sex with more than one person ever, wearing a short skirt, wearing a tight dress, wearing makeup, flirting, having big boobs, and crucially the thing is you don't even have to do half of those things. People just have to think you are.
So can we now just conclude that the term slut is used as a general derogatory term and actually has no specific meaning?
One thing I want to say immediately is that judging someone else's sex life or perceived sex life is not okay. Whether a woman sleeps with 5 people in a week or with nobody ever, it's none of your fucking business. So stop imposing your own standards on other people and making them feel really shitty for no reason. Okay?
Yeah, you totally shouldn't be allowed to judge people by their actions or indeed the merit of those actions. Especially if that person is a woman and your judgment makes her feel bad. But hey, let me give you an example here. A man is interested in having a monogamous sexual relationship with a woman. He then finds out that that woman that he is interested in pursuing for a monogamous relationship, she likes to go out every night and have a new sexual encounter with a different man, and has in fact in the past been found to have sexual encounters with multiple men at the same time. It is completely within her right to do all of these things. Is it then wrong for that man to look at that woman and then question not only if she is willing to be in a monogamous relationship, but that if she is even capable of such a thing? By your definition, this is slut-shaming and is wrong. In reality, this is one person assessing their life goals, comparing those to the life goals of another person, and realizing that there is little to no correlation, which then leads them to conclude that pursuit of said monogamous relationship would be folly, which seems entirely reasonable when you actually think about it.
Secondly, being a woman and enjoying sex is not a crime.
No one ever said it was, nor implied such a thing.
We have such a messed up standard at play for women and sexuality in our society. Earlier this year I attended the UK Slut Walk along with, I think, most of the other dames, and Slut Walk is something that I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. My sign read, this virgin whore dichotomy is getting pretty fucking old. And it is. On one hand, women are meant to be good girls and be modest and, God forbid, never ever want to have sex, because if you do then you're a slut or an animal or unnatural. But on the other hand, we're meant to look hot and sexually available at all times, and if we don't do that then we're prissy or frigid or stuck up.
Would you like to generalize a little bit more? Because this sounds like it's a vast array of opinions held by a vast array of people. I'm pretty sure that no one person has ever said all of those things together, let alone attached any sort of quantifiable number or boundary to any of those criteria.
There's no room for manoeuvre. How are we meant to express our sexuality in a healthy way?
By doing what you want to do and saying fuck the haters, while also accepting that your actions do have consequences. It really doesn't get much more simple than that.
is no alternative. We're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't.
Yeah, you can't please everyone because different people have different moral standards. This is something that you have to learn to deal with. And I would suggest that the best place to start in doing so is by being entirely confident in who you are and what you are doing, rather than trying to thought police other people.
Slut walk happened because of the ridiculous comments of one Toronto police officer, Michael Sanguinetti. He said that women should avoid dressing like sluts in order not to be victimised. This implies that if you dress provocatively or like a slut, then you deserve everything that's coming to you, that you're asking for it. And you're not. Rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment is never, ever the victim's fault. Ever. You are not to blame for it. I promise.
Clothing carries connotations and sends a message. You may not like that fact, but it is true. If clothing had no meaning at all, we would not have a multi-billion-dollar global fashion industry. But hey, dress how you want, because any resulting violence that comes from your choice of attire will never be your fault. I promise.
Aside from his comments being victim-blaming and slut-shaming, they represent a myth that we have in society about rape. That rape is something which only happens to women who are slutty, or who are asking for it, or who are dressed provocatively.
I hope you have some amazing sources to back up those claims.
I'm going to give you some facts about rape, which are inevitably heartbreaking, but unless we begin to acknowledge these facts and talk about them, we're never going to dispel the idea that rape happens to women who are sluts. UCLA researchers found that 54% of teenage boys thought it was acceptable to rape a woman if she led him on. So don't tell me that we don't need to keep pointing out that rape is a bad thing, because clearly not everybody knows it is.
Well, let's have a look at some of those sources, shall we? So the first study that you link to is not actually a study at all. It is in fact just the abstract of the study. And the first sentence of that abstract instantly makes me very suspicious of the motives of the people writing this study. Let's read it, shall we? Unlike stranger rape, acquaintance rape, particularly dating rape, takes place in the context of normal social activity. That is a hell of an assertion to make at the beginning of an abstract, and it really makes it sound like the authors of this paper are trying to push a very specific narrative. There is also no actual reference in this abstract to that 54% that you've quoted. They simply say in this abstract that people have different perceptions of what interpersonal cues signal sexuality and when, if ever, sexual assault was justified. So your first source is a complete failure. But hey, I guess the second one is going to back you up, right? And this is where I laugh really hard. Because since you've linked to that study, that domain has in fact been bought by someone else. And actually, this page now hosts a very large image explaining to you in several ways how this supposed poll is complete and utter bullshit. It does simple little things like point out that the original questionnaire was not yes or no, and was in fact on a 5-point sliding scale, which means that later on, someone came along and somehow correlated a yes or no answer out of questions where the answer came in degrees of 5 instead of a binary, which is incredibly suspicious to say the least. So yeah, thanks for not only linking a bogus source, but then also linking a second source that debunked the first.
9 out of 10 rape victims are women, and women of colour are more likely to be raped than white women.
Okay, so this one took a little bit of digging considering you didn't actually provide any links to this study. So I went to the RAIN website and I was able to locate their 9 of every 10 rape victims were female in 2003 statistic. Turns out that statistic comes from a US Department of Justice 2003 National Crime Victimization Survey. And I just so happen to have been able to dig up that exact survey on the internet. And then we wade through all of the information in this document to find out that once again this is a study that has combined rape and sexual assault into one category. Meaning that even if only one person in that category was actually raped and the other hundreds of thousands were not, that you can still read this study and imply that all of them were the victims of rape. This is just disingenuousness at its finest. Because the knowledge that 179,000 women were the victim of some sort of sexual assault isn't bad enough already. No, you have to go and misrepresent it and try and make it seem a lot worse than it already is. Even if only one woman is the victim of sexual assault, nay, even if only one human is the victim of sexual assault, that is still an unacceptably high number. However, intentionally misquoting figures like this not only causes fear and panic where it is not necessary, but it is incredibly disrespectful of people who have actually gone through these crimes. And now we're going to deal with your claim of women of colour being raped more often than white women, and I still cannot stand the term people of colour, because every time I hear it, it reminds me of this sort of bullshit. This study at no point actually breaks down ethnicities of victims of rape, or even victims of sexual assault. The absolute closest that it gets is a table of violent victimization rates of selected demographic categories, in which you can see that yes, people who are black are more likely to be the victims of overall violent crime than people who are white. But once again, this is an incredibly disingenuous claim, based on an extrapolation from numbers that aren't even related to the thing that you are attempting to prove.
2/3 of rapes are committed by somebody the victim knows.
Actually, it's only 2/3 of assaults, according to Rain, but because they constantly shuttle things like rape and sexual assault around into varying categories to suit varying numbers for suitable shock value, I can see how you would make this mistake.
Nearly 1/3 of people in the UK think that a woman is partially or totally responsible for her rape if she was drunk. Drunken consent is not consent.
Once again, you didn't actually provide a link to this study, and unfortunately I haven't actually been able to find one. But let's tackle this from a moral standpoint exclusively then. If someone becomes intoxicated, does that mean that they are now no longer responsible for their own actions? So the drunken woman having sex with a man cannot consent and is therefore not responsible for her own actions. Does this also mean that the drunk driver is not responsible for their own actions? That person chose to put themselves into that frame of mind. That person is aware of the intoxicating effects of alcohol before partaking in drinking it. I think all in all, this entire thing comes down to actions have consequences. Deal with it. Encouraging people to take preventative action is not victim blaming. It is in fact no different from locking your front door when you leave your home, locking your car when you are leaving it alone for extended periods of time, stowing valuables away in concealed locations. They are precautions that you should take because you must be aware that we live in an imperfect world. These sorts of measures should not be necessary, but they are always going to be.
1/3 of people in the UK believe that a woman is partially or totally responsible for her own rape if she was flirting. Flirting is not consent. She isn't responsible.
I am just going to call bullshit here. If you are flirting with someone, you know that you are flirting with them, and you know exactly what the purpose of flirting is. While that doesn't excuse rape, it still very heavily implies consent. But don't just take my word for it. Here is the opinion of Camille Paglia, a notable feminist author.
But let's set up two possible scenarios. I can see someone saying, all right, a woman goes out with a man, they wind up in a sexual situation, the signals are ambiguous, he has reason to believe that she thinks it's okay, she later interprets it differently, maybe even differently than she felt at the time, and places a different label on it, and these are no sorts of guidelines to run a railroad with.
Right.
I can understand that. On the other hand, I don't think that to qualify as rape, somebody has to jump out of the bushes carrying a club. What if we're out on a date, and you've consented to go out on a date with me, we have a conversation, we wind up back at my room. Just because we're in my room doesn't mean you've consented to anything that I can impose upon you.
I disagree with this. I feel that, again, through my study of history, that unchaperoned dating is a relatively recent phenomenon, and it's largely confined to the industrialized democracies. I feel that every day is potentially a sexual encounter. What else is it, all right? If a woman is not interested in sex, she must signal that from the start. She should not be going to a man's room alone. She should not be getting into a car with a strange man. These people can be Ted Bundys, all right? Look, we have to go back to the fact that it was my generation, the 60s generation, that broke all the rules. When I was in high school in the early 60s, we were protected as young women. We were expected to be virgins. Only tramps went to bed with the young guys, right? Now, in college, we're the ones who said to the campuses, get out of our sex lives. We were imprisoned in all-women dorms. We had to be in 11 o'clock at night and sign in. We said, let us make our own mistakes. They said, it is dangerous. You will be raped. We said, the price of freedom is risking rape. Now, what's happened today is that young women have inherited the freedoms that my generation won, but they do not realize that with that freedom come risks and responsibilities. Now, again, I'm saying sex is a dangerous and unstable, it's a combustible force. You cannot predict how someone is going to behave. A very rational person, male or female, can suddenly behave irrationally if you push the wrong button, because all kinds of things come flowing out of you that are nonverbal, that are beneath the conscious realm. But Freud was thrown out of the feminist movement 20 years ago by Kate Millett, who declared him a sexist. So what I'm saying is that we're not even aware of things which can suddenly erupt up, all right? Things can lead, I mean, gay men have known for centuries that the price of sex can be death. Gay men, since the time of ancient Rome, were going down to the docks, into the alleyways, and ending up beaten up and dead, all right? What is this sentimentality that the glorious Steinem wing of feminism has created around the issue of sex? It's supposed to be completely this totally risk-free, cotton candy thing. Everything is wonderful, and the slightest thing that's disturbing or abusive is somehow, it's always coming from men. Men are generating it. I am saying women are giving signals, nonverbal signals that they're not aware of, okay? If a girl goes to a fraternity party dressed like Madonna, is drinking 11 tequilas, and goes up to a man's room, she is communicating below the level of language. I'm sorry, it does not do any good to say no always means no. Now I'm saying no. To go to a man's room is, in effect, to consent to sex. This is what I want to bring back. Right? I'm pro-sex. I'm saying go with it. Go with it, girl. Okay? Go with it. Have the adventure, but stop whining when you wake up hungover the next day, and he doesn't call, and he doesn't send flowers, and then the feminists come around and convince you you've been raped.
So if I call you up for a date, and I pick you up and you get in the car, have you now placed yourself in such danger that no matter what I do, you've got no claim against me?
No, but what I'm saying is that my number one concern is the dignity and freedom of women. Right? I'm saying the dignity and freedom of women will not be achieved by overprotection of women. All right? It will be achieved by women taking personal responsibility for themselves and deciding what they want and being upfront about their sexual desires. I want women to want sex as much as men want sex.
That is what a feminist looks like, ladies. But back on track.
Calling someone a slut has really serious implications. It's something that's used not just to insult women, but to devalue them as well. So if a woman is seen as a total slut, then it's okay to pester her for sex, to sexually assault her, to harass her, to rape her. After all, she's just a stupid slut who was asking for it, right?
Again, I would point you to those articles that I referenced earlier that shows that calling someone a slut is not necessarily a sexual term, and is apparently in most cases completely unrelated to sex. People who pester and pressure other people for sex should always be viewed with suspicion, but it is a ridiculous assertion of you to make that it is exclusively women who are the victim of this.
After all, she's just a stupid slut who was asking for it, right?
Your assertion, no one else's. Although I can't help but think that there might be something else going on here.
The idea is that sluts are less than people, and it's a way to justify treating women like shit and basically like they're subhuman. Slut-shaming feeds rape culture. In the UK last year, 5 men in Preston were cleared of charges of gang rape because the woman had, in a previous MSN conversation, once said that she'd fantasized about the idea of group sex. When she arrived at the house of the guy that she'd been talking to, she was greeted by 6 men, all of whom expected to have sex with her. When she refused, because she only wanted to sleep with the one guy she'd gone to see, they raped her. The judge presiding over the case said that her credibility was shot to pieces because of that one conversation. This case is absolutely sickening. Admitting to having a fantasy is not a crime, nor does it justify horrific things being done to you. Desire for something is not consent to the act happening. What those men did to her was rape, and they should have been convicted for it.
In your opinion. However, there was evidence that she not only desired that to happen, but actively encouraged it. This may very well be another in a long string of cases where a woman has sexual fantasies about group sex, and then later regrets it, which is why over the years there have been several court cases like this that have relied on video evidence to prove innocence. However, seeing as I haven't read any transcripts from this particular court case, I'm not going to say anything further on it.
We get this equation drilled into us that woman plus sex equals bad woman. That by having sex, she is deserving of insult, of being ostracised for it, of being punished for it. Sex before marriage for women used to be a massive taboo. It could ruin your life. And thankfully, we've got over that particular hurdle. But female sexuality still remains as a bad thing in our society.
It's interesting that you should say that, considering there are several women out there who have made entire careers talking about and celebrating female sexuality.
Controlling women's sexuality is a way of controlling women. Slut is a term used by women as well as men. Through internalised sexism, women are encouraged to compete for male approval and male attention, which translates into a very limited kind of power.
Ah, there we go. The good old patriarchy strikes again, because women are in fact incapable of making their own decisions and acting by themselves. Because as we all know, women do not possess free agency. They are always being puppeted by a man.
As Laura Tenenbaum said, slut bashing is a cheap and easy way to feel powerful. If you feel insecure or ashamed about your own sexual desires, all you have to do is call a girl a slut, and suddenly you're the one who is good and on top of the social pecking order.
So it would seem that it is a completely natural thing for people to do to help establish social hierarchies. Sure, it might be a bitchy as fuck way of doing it, but that is very much by the by. And now a really important question which I think we should address here. If slut-shaming is used by women as a social hierarchy pecking order mechanic, and that this is all perpetuated by patriarchal men, somehow, why is it that it is still observable in environments that do not have men, and where the people at the top of the ladder are still women?
I've not been able to cover everything that I would like to in this video, so please get in touch. Video responses or email or Tumblr posts or comments or tweets or whatever. Tell us about your experiences with slut-shaming.
Yep, kinda just did that.
Thank you for watching. Bye.
Oh, she's just so cute. Please be in London.